and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
Why does he have kids standing behind him?
May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
That, of course, was President Bush, who is in Florida in Longboat Key. He was speaking at an elementary school. He had planned to be talking about literacy. Obviously, he had to change. He mentioned that this is an apparent terrorist attack. He is traveling back to Washington. He said that he had spoken to the governor of New York as well as the vice president, that all the resources will be brought to bear by the federal government to determine who did this and who was responsible for this terrible, terrible event. And then, of course, it was followed by a moment of silence for the victims.
We're going to go to Andrea Mitchell now, who has more information on this tragedy. Andrea?
Matt and Katie, I've spoken to a top U.S. official who says that early reports to our intelligence community and to other officials within the administration are that this was a hijacked American Airlines plane en route from Boston to Los Angeles. One of the two planes, they say, was apparently a hijacked American Airlines plane. They caution that early reports still need further confirmation, but this is at least what the U.S. government is being told by American Airlines officials, apparently. They are assuming and have obviously informed the president that this is a terror attack.
And Andrea, we have no information as to in what term of the flight this plane was taken over, how much warning that air traffic controllers may have had that someone hostile was at the controls of this plane?
Exactly right. They had no other information, just that at least one of the two planes was hijacked from Boston en route to Los Angeles, presumably after it had already been in the air and en route, because I was told en route to Los Angeles. So probably hijacked after it had taken off. As you know, those are very short flights. Those are usually 737s or 757s on that route. But this clearly, according to the U.S. government, is a terror attack, as you heard the president say. Now, one of the things, Matt and Katie, we should understand is that there was no specific threat that the U.S. government is aware of. No specific terror alert other than the worldwide caution that had been reissued in recent days because of the strife in the Middle East, because of concerns over terrorists. Of course, the best known is Osama bin Laden, but no alert coming from his organization. And as far as they know, as of this morning, as of this minute, he is in Afghanistan.
But as we should mention, Andrea, it appears that this was a well-coordinated bombing or terrorist act because of the fact that two planes were used, both substantial in size, and the fact that they both hit the World Trade Center within 18 minutes of one another. Obviously, a lot of planning went into this attack. Let's go to NBC's Jim Miklashevsky at the Pentagon now. Mick, what can you tell us?
Matt, to add to what Andrea Mitchell just said, senior military officials here at the Pentagon are saying they are getting information that the American Airlines Flight 11, after it left Boston, apparently, was hijacked and was diverted. Apparently, the early information was being diverted to JFK for some reason, and then obviously nobody knows exactly who was at the controls of the plane, but it broke off its route from to Los Angeles and was headed toward JFK. That was the initial information that officials had received when obviously it did not go to JFK, but veered off and headed toward the World Trade Center. But again, no indication as to who may be responsible or who was at the controls of that plane when it rammed into the World Trade Center. Matt.
Nick, thank you. We're going to be obviously talking with you throughout the morning, but right now we want to talk with Larry Johnson, a terrorism expert, in fact, the former deputy director of the State Department's Office on Counterterrorism. Mr. Johnson, can you please put this into some kind of perspective for us and give us your insight on what might have happened here?
Well, first we need to be cautious before jumping to the conclusion that it's necessarily terrorism. I mean, I would be inclined, based upon the preliminary reports we've seen, to say that that's the case. But There's always the possibility that you may find out after the fact that this was some suicide pact for some reason that had nothing to do with politics. That said, this is a first. Back in 1992, there was 93, there was a Lufthansa plane hijacked from Germany, and it ended up landing in New York. And one of the concerns we had at that time was the possibility of that plane under the control of a hijacker flying it into one of the buildings. My concern now is that there's always we ignore terrorism. We talk a lot about it, but we ignore taking very practical steps on security fronts until something like this happens. And then the pendulum swings out to an extreme. The next thing you hear people talking about putting surface-to-air missiles on top of buildings to prevent this kind of thing. This is a very rare event. It's unlikely to be repeated, but, and I think President Bush put his finger on it, we have to find who did this, and any country, any nation in the world that is in any way involved and responsible if it turns out to be terrorism will require a response from the United States, and the United States has got to be willing to pay that price.
Mr. Johnson, obviously we were completely stunned when about 25 minutes after the first explosion, or after the first plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers, another very large plane did the same thing. And we've been talking with our correspondents all morning about sort of if another incident could happen on the heels of these two. What kind of measures are in place to prepare for something else that could conceivably happen?
Well, I think one of those steps is already being taken. I was at National Airport getting ready to fly to LaGuardia when this occurred. They have shut down air traffic going in and out of the cities. Now, apart from shutting down the air traffic, you're talking about an enormous disruption economically for the nation right now with the air traffic not going in, and people are they're going to err on the side of caution. I think across the board, you're going to look at the major hubs in the United States where there are large buildings: Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles. And there are going to be extra measures taken. One possibility is you can start putting up air cover and require that planes stay within a particular area and do not approach any closer. And if they approach, you would go to the extremes of having the U.S. Air Force intercept.
Larry, I wanted to ask you, all morning that correspondents have also been saying, particularly Bob Kerr and Jim Miklashevsky, that there was and Andrea Mitchell, no warning attached to this event.
Right.
Generally speaking, do we get some kind of, do U.S. officials, government agencies get some kind of warning from a particular group, or is this fairly typical in terms of an event happening without any foreshadowing?
No, Katie, this unfortunately is typical. It's only in the movies that you get the advanced warnings. You look at every major terrorist incident against the United States, whether you're talking Pan Am 103, the World Trade Center, the USS Cole bombing, bombing in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. Okay. Rarely do you get an advance notice.
Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jim Miklashevsky has some new information at the Pentagon. I hope you'll stand by and continue to talk with us. Mick?
Katie, I don't want to alarm anybody right now, but apparently it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon. We're on the E-ring of the